So what does this patrolling agreement mean? Will there be total disengagement now and a return to the pre-2020 status in Ladakh and Depsang and Demchok? Is the state set now for a Modi-Xi meet in Russia? Can India really trust China? Joining me now, special guest Brahma Chelani, strategic affairs expert, former advisor to India's National Security Council. Also with us, Ambassador Rajdeep Sardesai, former Indian Consul General to Karachi. Lieutenant General Atta Hasnain is joining us. And Andrew K.P. Lui, Chinese strategist and analyst. Appreciate all of you joining us on the show today. Let me come to you, Brahma, today because you've been very skeptical in the past about what China affirms on paper and what happens in practice. Do you see this as a major breakthrough, this promise of a return to a pre-2020 situation?
There has been no announcement from China so far. The announcement has come only from India, but no details have been released. The military standoff between the two countries is now in its fifth year. To end that standoff, three things are required, three steps: disengagement, de-escalation, and de-induction of rival forces. Today, what has been announced by the Indian side only relates to the first step, disengagement of rival forces. The second and third steps would be very difficult because China has created permanent new warfare-related infrastructure along the India frontier. So a return to status quo ante, both in terms of how the border looked before April 2020 or how the territorial control existed along the Ladakh frontier before April 2020, when China made its land grabs on Indian territory, that status quo ante is not coming back. So we should be very clear on one thing. While it's a welcome step toward diffusing some tensions and beginning the process of engagement, beginning the process of dialogue with China, we should not see this as a breakthrough, and we should not read this as a return to status quo ante. Status quo ante will not come.
I'll come to you more specifically as to why you believe status quo ante will not come and what that means. But before that, just to get a perspective from our guest from China, Andrew K.P. Lui, you heard Brahma Chelani saying, why haven't the Chinese responded? India has made an official statement. Why haven't we seen, can we expect a similar statement from the Chinese in the next 24 hours that there is an agreement now on disengagement?
I think it's inevitable that both leaders will meet each other at this upcoming BRICS summit. But let's not forget that both leaders make it quite clear that they wanted to de-escalate the situation months and before this moment. I mean, the direction to de-escalate actually came about months ago. And also, this current situation is significant because it comes right on the eve of a big BRICS summit in Russia. Right. And of course, the rise of the Global South is seen by both leaders as a very important dynamics that define the coming decades. And I think that both leaders will see that maintaining a less confrontational relationship between the two countries would be good on both sides. Now, as far as India is concerned, it also is seeing that continuing this needless confrontation is not going to end up resulting in any benefits on either side. So I think that this is significant. Now, on the other hand,
let me stop you for a moment because I've got Rajdeep Sardesai to respond to what you just said, that you, in a way, the timing is linked to what is likely to happen at BRICS, the possible shake hands between the two leaders. We don't know whether there could be a bilateral on the sidelines. But Mr. Sardesai, do you see all of this in a calendar because India and China both have recognized that these kind of hostile face-to-face confrontation cannot continue for longer? Do you see that photo op taking place, or do you see something warmer between the two leaders at the BRICS summit?
Well, firstly, both India and China realize that it is costing them a lot, both in terms of manpower being stationed there, logistics, and the expenditure. And there is always a risk that a little spark, Galwan type, can escalate into a situation which is undesirable. So that is point number one. The second point is that summits are occasions to nudge the officials on both sides to do something which the summit leaders can shake hands on. So let's assume that this is one of those occasions when officials have worked hard to ensure that there's a package on which both sides can shake hands and smile and give a signal to the world. The signal to the world is more important because
Right.
China at this time is engaged in its oceanic boundaries, South China Sea, where it has problems with Philippines and others, and Taiwan, where it is concentrating its aircraft and ships and so on. So strategically, at the moment, China sees that portion as the one that it should get whatever it wishes to.
But the question,
As far as India is concerned,
but the question, I'll again stop you for a moment because you're raising points with Atta Hasnain. You want to respond. That the diplomats seem to see it as a breakthrough moment from a military perspective. As Brahma Chelani pointed out, restoring status quo ante not so easy. The Chinese have pushed forward at different points. Do you see them fully disengaging into a pre-2020 situation? Is the military going to be fully on board on whatever's been decided diplomatically?
Well, Rajdeep, first of all, 4th May 2020 is the date which is being spoken of in terms of status quo ante. And I agree with the Rabbi Shalani Sahab that a lot has happened in the last 4.5 years in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of deployment and things like that. To roll back that entire thing overnight without a proper detailed agreement may not be possible. I think this is more an opportunity which is being created. Primarily, it's a baby step, essentially to create the right environment, some kind of overcoming a little bit of the trust deficit to allow the two leaders, India and China, to meet at Kazan and hopefully to be able to take it beyond this. This is also, of course, in the context of the overall international environment where it seems as if there are some perceptions that China and India need to come together. There is more convergence in our interest at the moment, and this is the opportune moment to actually take advantage of that.
The concern, of course, Brahma Chelani, you have is, correct me if I'm wrong, that the infrastructure that the Chinese have put in place over the last 5 years will not be dismantled. Am I correct?
It has become a hot border. It will remain a hot border. But there are other larger issues. The standoff began because of Chinese encroachments in eastern Ladakh. Those encroachments triggered a robust Indian military response. Xi Jinping thought that he could present those land grabs as a fait accompli to India. But India responded by deploying large numbers of troops and weapons along the frontier, more than matching China's deployments. We created some buffer zones. Those buffer zones have come up largely on Indian territory. No details were released, largely because of the fact that these three major buffer zones were created largely on areas that Indian troops had patrolled traditionally. Now, no details have been released about this so-called new patrolling arrangement. The irony is this: the root of the present border crisis lies in China's violation of formal agreements on border management, including patrolling. So now we have a new arrangement on patrolling, which is not a formal agreement, whose details have not been released, and we expect the Chinese side to honor this informal understanding. So I am trying to add a note of caution The media is hyping this as a breakthrough. The Chinese have yet to release their statement on this understanding. And we have to recognize that China is not going to roll back its land grabs in Depsang and Demchok. What this new patrolling arrangement is, only time will tell, because details creep out slowly, as they did in the case of the buffer zone arrangements.
You're striking a note of caution. Rajiv Dogra, I had interrupted you when you said, what does India get out of this? You know, where does India stand? Are we trusting the China? Is this about getting the optics right ahead of BRICS? Or is there something more substantive? There was a period when Xi and Mr. Modi seemed to share a warm relationship. They were on a swing in Ahmedabad. They went to Mahabalipuram together. Do you see a return to that? Can India really treat this as business as usual?
No, there's not going to be any India-China bye-bye again. There's been a lot of mistrust that has been created since 1962, and that mistrust still lingers. So I don't think India is going to forget that you have to verify and not trust. That is going to be the mantra.
No, because I'm playing pictures of Xi and Modi together in Mahabalipuram, earlier in Ahmedabad. Do you see that bonhomie returning, or that can't return in your view?
You see, in international relations, the bonhomie is always there. They're not going to indulge in a fist fight. They will always be smiling. There may be moments when they convey some through facial expressions, but they are leaders of two important countries. If they scowl at each other, what is the result? What is the message to the two people of India and China? So that I hope will not happen. But the point here is that we should not start with, critiquing every move of India as far as China is concerned. I would accept that on Pakistan, but we have to give the possibility of an agreement and some kind of stability along the LSE a chance. I agree entirely with Brahmachalani that yes, as far as the present thing is concerned, the disengagement has not worked to our advantage according to the reports, because the buffer zone created is on our territory. Whether it is a replication of that in the arrangement announced today, we have to wait and see.
So should we be pressing the pause button, Atta Hasnain? From a military perspective, should we press the pause button before, we say all issues sorted out, given that there's been a land grab in Depsang, given that there was a land grab in Demchok, and we don't know the exact situation still on the ground?
See, Rajdeep, escalation happens in a matter of seconds. And de-escalation invariably takes years. So, when you're looking at de-escalation here, I think it's a question of really putting the pause button, and it will move very, very incrementally. One shouldn't look at it as if one fine day there's an announcement and everything is hunky-dory and resolved. It's not going to happen that way. We all understand it. We all know how international relations work. So, an important event is taking place in Kazan. I think we are preparing ourselves for that. We are preparing the ground to ensure that our Prime Minister and the President of China meet out there. There is some positivity in the backdrop behind it. That is about all. The details of this will have to be worked out much more in detail subsequently if this have to be made to work out.
Mr. Lewing, are there pressures that Xi is also under? We are looking at it from an Indian perspective, but what about China? Is China also feeling the heat at the moment because you find yourself facing conflicts on multiple fronts?
So is that the question for me?
Yes, sir. What are the pressures that Xi is operating under?
Thank you. Well, I don't think that China looks at it that way. I think that China's approach to this breakthrough within quotation marks is on much bigger picture, aside from the border disputes between China and India, which have lasted for decades. I think that this slight breakthrough on patrolling is only a milestone but significant milestone in de-escalation. It is not going to resolve the border disputes. It's not going to define the line of actual control accurately, but it does represent a momentum towards building a more constructive relationship between the two countries. As I said, I mean, the relationship between China and India is only a part of the big game facing both countries in terms of the rise of the global south, of which the BRICS summit, of course, a very important platform. And I think that both leaders would like to be seen to have a more elbow room to play in leading the momentum of the global south, which is defining, in many ways, the global order.
You speak
So
of the.
I think that we should look at the situation in this context.
You speak of the global south, given, of course, what happened when the G20 summit was there. President Xi didn't come for that. Do you get a sense, though, Brahma Chelani, that we just can't trust the Chinese? We don't know what they'll do next. A quick answer.
The real problem, Rajdeep, is the expansionist impulse of the Chinese Communist Party. So it's not just India. Take any neighbor of China. It cannot trust China simply because of Chinese expansionism. But as far as India's foreign policy is concerned, India pursues an independent approach to international affairs in which hedging and balancing are key elements. So given the perception that Modi's foreign policy has a distinct pro-Western tilt, balancing that perception has become important. So improving relations with China works to India's advantage, but India has to improve relations with China on terms that are mutually beneficial. It cannot be one-sided. Remember what happened in 2017, Doklam? Xi Jinping and Modi kept meeting. They met 18 times over 5 years. Those meetings did not help dissuade China from encroaching on territories in East Ladakh. So one more meeting now on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan will not change the trajectory of China-India relations. But for India, balancing remains important.
Okay. I think that's interestingly put. Clearly, the jury is out whether this disengagement will result in a major breakthrough on the border, on the LAC. That will be tested by Chinese intent over the next few months. But I appreciate my guest joining us on the big story of the day.